Imagine this. You've just dragged a child out of a burning house. The smoke is still clinging to your lungs. Your hands are trembling, and the mother is screaming in relief. You've saved a life. But before you can even catch your breath, a police officer rushes toward you, gun drawn, yelling for you to get on the ground. That's exactly what happened to Lieutenant Danielle Taylor, a black firefighter, a hero in her city, who found herself under attack by a white cop right after rescuing a child from the flames. What happened next shocked the entire community, and it all ended with that same cop dropping to his knees, begging her for forgiveness. Stay with me until the end of this story, because the twists and turns will leave you speechless. And if you care about justice, about truth, and about voices that need to be heard, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss stories like this one. The city always seemed quieter at night. Not peaceful, just still, as if everyone had agreed to hold their breath until morning came. Street lamps buzzed faintly. Sprinklers hissed in manicured lawns, and the hum of late-night traffic was a distant lullaby. But quiet never lasted long for Lieutenant Danielle Taylor. She was 34, a firefighter with 10 years of service, and one of the first black women to make lieutenant in her department's history. For Danielle, calm nights usually meant something was about to break. And at 11:47 p.m., something did. Her pager lit up, screaming its urgent call. Residential fire. Suburban district. Possible entrapment. Danielle's stomach tightened. Entrapment meant people inside. Children. Families. The kind of call where minutes meant the difference between life and death. She grabbed her helmet, pulled on her turnout gear, and in less than 2 minutes, she was on a fire engine, sirens wailing into the darkness. When they turned onto Maplewood Lane, the night sky itself seemed to be on fire. Flames licked at the second story of a neat two-story home. Orange tongues clawed into the sky, glowing against the black canvas of night. Smoke billowed out of shattered windows, choking and heavy. Neighbors were already outside, some screaming, others clutching children in their arms. Faces streaked with tears and soot. And then a voice pierced through the chaos. There's still someone inside. The boy, he's still in there. Danielle didn't pause. She didn't hesitate. Training took over. She barked orders to her crew. Hose line on the east side. Ventilate those windows. I'm going in. Her boots pounded against the driveway as she ran straight into the inferno. The smoke hit her like a wall, thick and suffocating. She dropped low, her flashlight cutting through the swirling haze. Fire department, call out if you can hear me. A faint cough answered, high-pitched, small. Danielle pushed forward, her lungs burning even through her mask. The stairs creaked as she charged upward, every second stretching like an eternity. And then she saw him, a little boy, maybe 6 years old, huddled in the corner of his bedroom, eyes wide with terror. His small hands clutched a toy car, his face streaked with tears and soot. Danielle dropped to her knees, pulling him close. It's okay, baby. I'm here. I'm gonna get you out. Hold on tight to me. The boy buried his face in her chest, coughing violently. Danielle lifted him in her arms, shielding his head with her helmet, and then she ran. The crowd gasped when they saw her silhouette emerge from flames. She's got him! She's got him! Someone screamed. Danielle stumbled forward, clutching the child tight. She pulled off her mask, her face dripping with sweat, her hair damp from the heat. The boy's mother broke through the crowd, screaming his name, tears streaming down her face. Danielle crouched, lowering the boy gently into his mother's arms. Relief washed over the crowd. A cheer rose up, neighbors crying, clapping, shouting her name. For a moment, Danielle allowed herself a breath. For a moment, she thought the danger was over. That's when the sound of screeching tires cut through the night. A police cruiser pulled up fast, blue and red lights strobing across the smoke. Out stepped Officer Brent Michaels. He was in his late 40s, tall, broad-shouldered, his face hard and set. He had been on the force for more than 20 years, and he believed in one thing above all else: control. Neighbors pointed frantically toward the house. She went in there. She saved him. But Michaels didn't look at the boy. He didn't look at the crowd. His eyes locked on Danielle. Sweat streaked, helmet in one hand, the glow of the fire painting her gear in shadow. And in his mind, he didn't see a firefighter. He saw only a black figure in heavy gear, carrying a child away from a burning home. Suspicious, dangerous, a threat. Michaels' hand twitched toward his holster. Put the child down. Put him down right now, he barked. Danielle froze. Her brain couldn't process what she was hearing. Was this cop? Was he yelling at her? She pulled off her helmet, her badge shining on her turnout coat. I'm Lieutenant Danielle Taylor, Fire Department. This child needs medical. But Michaels cut her off, voice sharp, commanding. On the ground. Now! The crowd erupted. She's a firefighter. She just saved him. But Michaels didn't listen. His voice grew louder, harsher. Drop the child. Get on the ground now. Danielle looked at the terrified boy, at his mother sobbing behind her, at the neighbors staring in horror. She raised a hand, pointing to her badge. Officer, look, Fire Department, please. But Michaels was already moving. His boots hit the pavement, heavy and fast. Danielle's heart hammered in her chest. This wasn't happening. Not here. Not now. Not after everything she had just done. But the look in his eyes told her the truth. He wasn't hearing her. He wasn't seeing her. And as his hand gripped the handle of his weapon, Danielle realized the fire might be behind her, but the real danger was standing right in front of her. And that's where everything changed. Danielle had risked her life to save a child, but in the next moments, her own life would be put on the line by the very officer sworn to protect her. What happened next would leave the entire city in shock. Stay with me. Her lungs burned. Her skin was sticky with sweat beneath her heavy gear. But she stood tall, as firefighters always do. Duty didn't allow for weakness, not in front of victims, not in front of the public. But before she could even take her helmet off, it happened. A police cruiser screeched to a halt in the street. A white officer, tall, broad-shouldered, his hand already gripping his holster, jumped out and pointed directly at Danielle. Hey! Hands where I can see them. The words cracked through the night like gunfire. Danielle froze, blinking in disbelief. She was still in full firefighter gear, reflective stripes glowing in the flashing lights. Oxygen tanks strapped to her back, stood across her face. She looked every bit the hero she was. Yet this man didn't see a firefighter. He saw only a black figure moving near a burning house, and his training or his prejudice, or maybe both, triggered like a loaded gun. On the ground. Now! He barked, voice shaking with adrenaline. Danielle's crew shouted from behind her. Officer, she's one of us. She's a lieutenant. She just pulled a kid out. But the officer didn't lower his weapon. His eyes stayed locked on Danielle, suspicion carved into every line of his face. And in that split second, Danielle's mind spun. Here she was, a decorated firefighter with 10 years of service, medals of bravery pinned to her uniform back at the station. She had spent her life running into danger to save strangers, never once thinking of their race, their gender, or their background. And now, because of hers, she was being treated like a criminal. Neighbors pulled out their phones. Camera flashes lit the scene. Some screamed, "She's the one who saved the child." Why is he aiming at her? But the officer's voice only grew louder, angrier. Down, hands behind your head. Danielle slowly raised her hands, trembling. Not out of fear of fire this time, but fear of the very person sworn to protect her. "Sir, I'm a firefighter," she said, voice calm but heavy. "I'm on duty. I just came out of that house." The officer sneered. "You think I'm stupid? You don't belong here. Get down now." Danielle felt humiliation burn deeper than the smoke in her throat. She had fought collapsing roofs, raging infernos, and explosions. But nothing felt as degrading as standing in front of her peers, her community, and being stripped of her dignity like this. Still, she tried reason. Look at my uniform. Look at the patch. Look at my crew. I'm Lieutenant Danielle Taylor. Badge 4132. I am not your threat. But prejudice doesn't always listen to logic. The officer lunged forward, grabbing her wrist, shoving her toward the ground. Her helmet clattered against the pavement. Sparks of pain shot up her arm. Gasps erupted from the crowd. She's a hero. Leave her alone. But the officer pinned her with knee pressed dangerously close to her neck. The same position that had taken George Floyd's life now replayed in a cruel echo. Only this time, the victim wore firefighter's gear. Danielle's fellow firefighters tried to intervene, but other police units had arrived by then, pushing them back. Stay out of this. One barked at her captain. We've got under control. Under control. The words felt like mockery. Danielle could barely breathe under the weight on her chest. Smoke-filled lungs struggled for air as gravel dug into her cheek. And in that moment, her life flashed before her, not from the flames, but from injustice. She thought of her mother telling her, "Baby girl, you'll have to be twice as good to get half the respect." She thought of the night she stayed late at the academy, proving herself stronger, faster, smarter. She thought of the child she had just saved, how she had sworn never to let fear stop her from doing what's right. And now, she was being treated as less than human. The phones kept rolling. Live streams buzzed on Facebook and Instagram. Hashtags were being born in real time. A woman shouted from the crowd, "Let her up. She's a firefighter." A teenage boy screamed, "Why are you doing this to her? She just saved my cousin." Even the child she had rescued, still coughing in the ambulance, tried to sit up and cry out for her. But the officer's grip only tightened. "Stop resisting," he shouted, though Danielle hadn't moved except to keep breathing. His words were a script, one written to justify violence long before the night. And then, finally, it happened. Her captain, a white man with 30 years of service, pushed past the blockade and stood inches from the officer. His voice thundered, "Get off my lieutenant, now." For the first time, hesitation flickered across the officer's eyes. He looked around, the cameras, the angry crowd, the flashing red lights. Reality was closing in. But would he let go? Danielle, face pressed to the asphalt, prayed silently. "Please, God, don't let me become another name on a hashtag." The officer's knee hovered, his hand twitching on the cuff. The crowd's voices rose into a chant. "Let her go! Let her go!" And just when it seemed like something irreversible was about to happen, when the tension snapped like a wire stretched too far, the officer slowly lifted his knee. Danielle gasped, coughing, sucking in smoky air like it was the sweetest gift she'd ever tasted. Her captain and crew rushed forward, pulling her to her feet, forming a human wall around her. The officer stepped back, face flushed, eyes darting at the dozens of cameras recording his every move. He wasn't protecting anyone anymore. He was protecting himself. But the damage had been done. Danielle stood, helmet in hand, chest heaving, eyes burning not just from smoke, but from something deeper, betrayal. The very city she had sworn to protect had just shown her how little it saw her. And this was only the beginning. Because as Danielle would soon discover, this incident wasn't going to be buried under paperwork. It was going to explode. The video of her assault would go viral within hours. The nation would know her name. Politicians, activists, and everyday people would take sides. And the officer who had pinned her down, Officer Brent Michaels, would find his world collapsing in ways he never imagined. But before that, Danielle herself would face the hardest choice of her life. Stay silent to keep her career, or speak out and risk everything. The sirens were still echoing faintly when Danielle sat in the back of the fire engine, her helmet resting in her lap, hands trembling against the metal rim. Her crew hovered nearby, Silent, restless, protective. The street where the fire had been blazing was now smothered in damp smoke. Fire hoses dripped. The crowd that had once screamed at the injustice now lingered in small clumps, watching, whispering, clutching their phones like weapons of truth. But Danielle couldn't hear any of that. All she could hear was the officer's voice replaying in her head. Get on the ground. Now. Her knees still burned from the pavement. Her throat ached from the pressure of his hand. She rubbed it instinctively, even though the red marks were already fading into ugly bruises. She had run into burning buildings 100 times, faced down walls of fire. But nothing had ever made her feel so powerless. Her captain, Marcus, broke the silence. Danny, we're filing this. Every single detail. You hear me? She didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the ground, where a small puddle reflected the orange of street lamps. Marcus crouched so she would meet his eyes. You're not just my firefighter. You're my sister. And what happened tonight? It doesn't disappear. Not this time. His words stirred something inside her, but she shook her head, still dizzy. He was a cop, Marcus. A cop. You think the department's gonna listen? You think anyone's gonna care about a firefighter bruised up in the middle of a fire scene? Marcus's jaw tightened. Care? Danny, the world already cares. Didn't you see the cameras? This wasn't hidden. It's out there. By morning, the whole damn country will know your name. He was right. At 2:13 a.m., the first shaky cell phone video hit Twitter. By 3:07 a.m., it had been retweeted over 30,000 times. By sunrise, the hashtag Justice for Danielle was trending across the nation. The video was raw, grainy, filled with chaos, but the brutality was clear. A firefighter in full gear, hands raised, pleading, and a police officer forcing her to the ground, hand on her neck, while the crowd screamed. Clips were stitched together by strangers across the internet. TikTok edits layered her cries over protest chants. Instagram reels flash her name in bold letters. Danielle Jackson, 34 firefighter hero. By breakfast time, news anchors were repeating her name like it was etched into history. But Danielle didn't see any of it. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, still in her undershirt and turnout pants, staring blankly at the floor. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Hundreds of calls, thousands of texts, but she couldn't bring herself to look. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back there again, the officer's shadow falling over her, the cold of the asphalt, the sound of people screaming. She's saving lives. She's one of us. Her chest tightened until she thought she might pass out. She whispered to herself, "You're a firefighter. You're strong. You face worse." But the truth was, she wasn't sure she had. Meanwhile, across town, Officer Brett Michaels was sitting in a silent police locker room, his uniform shirt balled up in his fists. His face was pale, jaw clenched. The chief had called him in at 4 a.m., demanded an explanation. Brent had mumbled something about crowd control, about confusion in the smoke. But even as he said the words, he knew they sounded weak. He had seen the phones pointed at him. He knew what those videos would show. The department's PR team was already in overdrive. At dawn, they released a statement. An incident occurred last night during an active fire scene. Officer Michaels acted in the interest of public safety under chaotic circumstances. We are reviewing all footage. The spin was predictable. Cold, corporate, but the city wasn't buying it. By noon, protesters had gathered outside the police precinct. They carried signs. Firefighters save lives. Police take them. Some held up Danielle's photo in her uniform, smiling proudly next to her fire engine, an image ripped from her department's website. The contrast between that woman and the broken figure on the pavement was too stark to ignore. Danielle stayed off social media. She tried to keep her head down, to go back to routine. But routine was impossible. Everywhere she went, people recognized her. At the grocery store, a woman pressed her hand and whispered, "We saw what you did. We're with you." At the gas station, a man shouted across the lot, "Stay strong, firefighter." And at the firehouse, reporters camped outside, their cameras ready to capture every flicker of her expression. But inside, in quiet locker room, Danielle felt only dread. She had joined the fire service to save lives, not to become a symbol, not to have her face plastered across headlines, not to feel hunted. One night after her shift, she broke down. She called her mother. "Nah, I don't want this. I don't want to be the story. I just want to fight fires. That's it." Her mother's voice was gentle but firm. "Baby, sometimes you don't get to choose. Sometimes the story chooses you. And when it does, you have to decide what kind of ending it will have." The police department doubled down. They released edited body cam footage showing only fragments of night. They painted Danielle as non-compliant, claimed she was interfering with officers during an evacuation. The narrative was thin, but powerful in the right circles. Comment sections filled with trolls calling her a liar, an angry black woman. Even a plan to stir anti-police sentiment. Danielle read the comments once. Just once. The venom stung so deep she slammed her laptop shut and swore never to look again. But the damage was done. She wasn't just fighting her trauma anymore. She was fighting an entire machine. Marcus pushed her to speak out publicly. "Danny, people need to hear it from you. Your voice, not just the videos, not just the hashtags. You." She resisted at first. She didn't want to stand in front of cameras, to relive every second. But one night, as she lay awake staring at the ceiling, she remembered the faces in the crowd, the children who would watch her beg for air, the neighbors who had screamed for her. If she stayed silent, what message would that send? The next morning, she called Marcus. "Set it up. I'll talk." The press conference was packed. Reporters filled the firehouse garage. Lights blinding, microphones stacked like weapons on the podium. Danielle stood in her dress blues, hand steady on the lectern. Her voice cracked only once when she said, "I wore this uniform to save lives." That night, I wasn't treated like a firefighter. I wasn't treated like a human being. I was treated like a threat by someone who swore to protect us. The room was silent, except for the rapid clicks of cameras. When she finished, the crowd erupted. Cheers, tears, chants of her name. And outside, the protest grew louder. But not everyone was cheering. In a quiet suburban house, Officer Brent Michaels sat on his couch, the TV flickering with Danielle's speech. His wife sat rigid beside him, their teenage son glaring. How could you?" the boy asked. Brent had no answer. His son stormed upstairs, slamming the door. For the first time since that night, Brent Michaels felt something worse than fear. He felt shame. By the second week, the mayor announced an independent investigation. Civil rights lawyers reached out to Danielle, offering support. National figures tweeted her name. The city was on fire, not with flames, but with anger, with resolve, with the undeniable demand for justice. And as Danielle watched the tide swell, she knew the fight was only beginning, because the system wasn't going to hand her justice. She would have to take it. Late one night, Danielle returned to the firehouse to grab her gear. The building was quiet, her footsteps echoing in the empty bay. As she reached for her locker, she froze. Taped to the metal door was a note, handwritten in thick block letters. "Stop now or next time you won't walk away." Her blood turned to ice. This wasn't just about one officer anymore. This was war. Danielle could still feel her niece's small hand pressed against hers when the flashing cameras started closing in. A dozen microphones extended toward her face, their foam tips like spears, each one carrying the weight of a question that could define her life. Danielle, how does it feel to know the officer is still on the force? Do you think race played a role in what happened to you? Will you press charges? Her niece tugged gently at her sleeve, whispering, "Auntie, let's go home." Danielle didn't answer the reporters. She couldn't. Not yet. Her throat was locked tight with the emotions she'd been swallowing since that night. She lifted her niece into her arms, turned away from the flashing lights, and walked back into the station. But she knew the time was coming when silence would no longer protect her. Inside, her captain, Marcus Green, waited for her in his office. Marcus was in his late 40s, a tall, broad man with streaks of gray in his beard. He had mentored Danielle from the day she joined the department. He closed the blinds as she entered, shutting out the chaos of the media storm. "Sit down, Danny," he said softly. She obeyed, setting her niece on a chair nearby with a coloring book one of the firefighters had given her. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his desk. "Listen, I've been quiet up until now, because I didn't want to push you before you were ready. But it's clear the city's not going to do the right thing on its own. The union's protecting that cop. The brass is pretending nothing happened. The only way this changes is if you speak up." Danielle stared at the floor, her jaw tight. "And if I do, you know what happens. They'll drag my name through the mud. They'll say I'm making it up, or that I exaggerated, or that I'm playing the race card. They'll say I hate cops." Marcus's voice hardened. "And what about your truth? What about what happened to you? You were saving lives while wearing this uniform, and a cop put you in cuffs and pressed your face into the ground. That's not something we bury. Danielle, that's something we fight." His words stung because she knew he was right, but fear clawed at her chest all the same. That night, Danielle lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her small apartment. She lived alone, except for the faint traces of her niece and nephew who visited often. Finger paintings stuck to her fridge, a pair of tiny shoes left under the couch. Her phone buzzed relentlessly on the nightstand. Dozens of messages from strangers she'd never met. Some offered support. "We stand with you, Danielle. Thank you for your bravery." But others dripped with venom. "Stop lying about our heroes. Should have stayed in the kitchen where you belong. Maybe you deserved it." The hate cut deep, sharper than she expected. But then she scrolled past a message from an older woman in Chicago. "My son died in a fire because the cops blocked the street and wouldn't let the firefighters through. I believe you. Don't give up." Danielle wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. For the first time since the incident, she whispered aloud, "I won't." The next morning, she made her decision. She called Marcus, her voice steady. "Set it up. A press conference. I'll tell my side." Marcus didn't hesitate. "I'll make the calls." 2 days later, the firehouse courtyard overflowed with cameras, reporters, and members of the community. Firefighters in uniform stood behind Danielle, a wall of silent solidarity. Her niece clutched her hand, just as she had at the memorial. Danielle stepped to the podium, her heart pounding. She could see the red tally lights on the cameras, the whole country watching. She took a breath and began. "My name is Danielle Taylor. I'm a firefighter with the city's department, and I've served this community for 10 years. I've run into burning buildings when everyone else was running out. I've carried children out of smoke-filled homes. I've held the hands of people taking their last breaths. I love this job, and I love the city. But 2 weeks ago, while on duty, while fighting a fire to save lives, I was attacked. Not by the flames, not by falling debris, but by a police officer." A murmur swept through the crowd. Danielle steadied herself. "I was thrown to the ground. I was cuffed, I was treated like a criminal while my brothers and sisters were still inside fighting to save lives. I was stripped of my dignity, and I was reminded, in the harshest way possible, that to some people, the color of my skin will always matter more than the uniform I wear. Her voice broke, but she pressed on. I'm not here to stir hate. I'm not here to divide. I'm here to demand accountability. Because no one, no firefighter, no paramedic, no nurse, no human being should ever be treated the way I was treated. And until there is justice, I will not be silent. The crowd erupted into applause. Some cheered, others cried. The camera zoomed in on her face, capturing the fire in her eyes. That night, her words were everywhere. Major news outlets carried the story. Hashtag spread like wildfire. Hashtag justice for Danielle. Hashtag protect those who protect us. But so did the backlash. The police union president appeared on television, stone-faced. Our officer, Brent Michaels, acted appropriately given the chaotic circumstances. This firefighter has clearly misunderstood his intentions. We stand by our officer, and we will fight these unfounded accusations. Danielle watched the segment on her phone, her stomach twisting. Unfounded accusations. As though her body hadn't hit the ground. As though her wrists hadn't bled from the cuffs. The following week, things escalated further. The district attorney's office announced a formal investigation. It was a rare move, one that signaled the mounting public pressure couldn't be ignored. Danielle was called in to testify. She sat in a small, sterile office downtown, a recorder blinking red on the table. The DA, a stern woman named Evelyn Ward, asked her to recount everything. Danielle closed her eyes and relived it. The heat of the fire, the smoke, the screams, then the crushing weight of Michaels's knee on her back. Her hands trembled as she spoke, but her voice never wavered. When she finished, Ward nodded slowly. We'll pursue charges. But you should know this won't be easy. The police union will come at you with everything they have. They'll try to smear your reputation, your record, even your personal life. Are you prepared for that? Danielle's throat tightened. She thought of her niece and nephew, of the younger firefighters who looked up to her, of the community that had rallied behind her. Yes, she said, I'm prepared. The trial preparations began. Danielle's name was now a headline. Her face appeared on magazine covers. Her story debated on talk shows. Supporters sent letters, flowers, and prayers. But opponents hurled insults, threats, and intimidation. One night, someone spray-painted the word liar in red across her apartment door. She scrubbed it clean the next morning, jaw set, refusing to let them break her. At the same time, her firehouse became a second battlefield. Some firefighters whispered that she was bringing bad attention. Others embraced her, telling her she was fighting for all of them. Marcus remained her anchor, reminding her daily, truth stands longer than lies. The courtroom date loomed closer. Reporters camped outside her station and her home. Protesters marched downtown with signs bearing her name. And then, just when it seemed the city had split in two, a shocking development shook everything. Officer Brent Michaels, the man who had cuffed her, who had pinned her to the ground, who had denied every accusation up until now, requested a private meeting with Danielle. The DA called her personally. He says he wants to talk. Off the record, just the two of you. Danielle froze, the phone tight in her hand. Why now? What game was he playing? Was it an attempt to intimidate her further, or was it something else? Her pulse quickened as she whispered, I'll think about it. The weight of her decision pressed heavy. She knew whatever happened next could change the course of everything. Danielle stands at crossroads. Should she face the man who attacked her in a private meeting, or refuse and let the trial play out without ever hearing his words? The answer could lead to either reconciliation or devastation. The courtroom had never felt heavier. By the 5th week of trial, the air inside was thick with tension, like static waiting for a storm to break. Every bench was filled. Families, reporters, activists, off-duty firefighters, and strangers drawn by the spectacle. The case of Officer Michaels had stopped being just another headline. It had become a symbol. On one side sat those demanding justice for Danielle Taylor, the firefighter whose courage had nearly cost her life. On the other, a shrinking but vocal circle of Michael's supporters, people who refused to believe that the uniform could hide a monster. The judge entered, robe swaying, his voice echoing. Court is now in session. All eyes turned forward. Danielle Taylor had rehearsed this moment in her mind countless times. Yet as she stepped forward, her knees trembled. She wore a navy blazer, her firefighter's badge pinned discreetly to the inside pocket, a reminder of who she was and what she had survived. Reporters scribbled as she raised her right hand and swore to tell the truth. Then she sat, her back straight, her jaw set. The prosecutor leaned forward. "Ms. Taylor, can you tell the jury what happened on the night of August 12th? Her eyes flickered, as though replaying the scene in flames. "That night," she began slowly, "I wasn't just fighting a fire. I was fighting for my life." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Danielle described the inferno. The moment she realized the fire was no accident, and the chilling image of Officer Michaels blocking her path out. "He wasn't there to save anyone," she said, voice cracking. "He was there to make sure I didn't walk out alive." The prosecutor's questions were careful, deliberate, giving her space to speak her truth. Danielle's hand shook as she recounted how Michaels shoved her back toward the blaze, how his face, stone cold and unyielding, was burned into her memory more vividly than the flames themselves. When the prosecutor displayed the photos of her burns, the courtroom went silent. But then came the defense attorney, a sharp-suited man named Grant Whitmore, notorious for tearing witnesses apart. He rose slowly, smiling with a confidence that felt like cruelty. "Ms. Taylor," he began, "you've told quite the story, but isn't it true you inhaled heavy smoke that night?" "Yes," Danielle admitted. "So your memory could be hazy?" "No," she said firmly. Whitmore smirked. "You expect this jury to believe, through thick smoke, flashing flames, and chaos, that you saw my client's face clearly? That you somehow know, without a doubt, it was him?" Danielle's lips trembled, but her voice cut sharp. "I'd know his face in a hurricane. I'd know his face in the dark. Because when someone tries to kill you, you don't forget who it was." The gallery erupted. The judge slammed the gavel. "Order." Whitmore pressed on, trying to sow seeds of doubt. "Isn't it also true you and Officer Michaels had disagreements in the past? Tensions on calls?" "Yes," Danielle said. "Because he cut corners. Because he treated people like they didn't matter. That wasn't a disagreement. That was me doing my job." Her defiance sent a shiver through the room. For once, Whitmore seemed rattled. Outside, cameras rolled around clock. News vans lined the courthouse steps. Protesters held signs, "Justice for Danielle," while counter-protesters shouted about protecting our officers. Pundits argued on nightly TV. Was Danielle a hero or an opportunist? Was Michaels a rogue officer or the symptom of something bigger? The nation was split, but the trial was uniting them in one thing: obsession. Every detail was dissected. When Michael sneezed, it was news. When Danielle walked into court clutching her sister's hand, the image made front pages. The city was on edge. Underscore. When it was Officer Michaels' turn to take the stand, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. He straightened his uniform, polished shoes reflecting the lights. To some, he still looked like the model cop, disciplined, composed. But the cracks were showing. The prosecutor wasted no time. "Officer Michaels, did you ever tamper with a fire report from August 12th? No. Did you alter the timeline when you arrived on scene? No. Then why?" The prosecutor snapped, slamming a binder on the desk. "Do the radio logs contradict your official report?" Michaels blinked, stuttered. "I don't know." The jury leaned forward. Reporter's pen scratched furiously. "Isn't it true you were the last person seen near Miss Taylor before she was trapped?" "That's not." "Yes or no, officer?" "Yes." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. The weeks of testimony wore on Danielle like a second skin of fire. Each cross-examination tore her open, and each night she cried alone in her apartment, reliving the blaze. One night, she nearly didn't come back. Her sister found her sitting on the bathroom floor, shaking. "I can't do this anymore," Danielle whispered. "They don't believe me. He's going to walk." But her sister lifted her chin. "You've already survived the worst of him. This," she gestured toward the courthouse in the distance, "this is just the final mile." The next morning, Danielle walked into court with renewed steel. The prosecution called final witnesses, neighbors, fellow firefighters, even a bystander who saw Michaels near the fire truck where he shouldn't have been. Piece by piece, the puzzle fit together. But what no one expected was a testimony from Captain Harris, Danielle's firehouse chief. Taking the stand, his voice cracked. "I failed her," he admitted. "We trusted Officer Michaels. We shouldn't have. I saw things, small things, that didn't add up, and I ignored them. That mistake nearly cost Danielle her life." The jury hung on every word. For the first time, Danielle felt she wasn't standing alone. It was during closing arguments that the breaking point came. The prosecutor painted Michaels as a man who wore the badge as a mask, who uses authority not to protect, but to destroy. The defense countered, accusing Danielle of fabrication, of playing hero to cover mistakes. The tension in the room boiled over. As Whitmore raised his voice, Danielle locked eyes with Michaels across the room. His face twisted, not in fear, but in rage. For a split second, his mask slipped. "You think you've won," he hissed under his breath, just loud enough for her to see his lips move. Danielle flinched. Reporters caught it. Cameras flashed. The judge noticed too. "Control your client, Mr. Whitmore." But the damage was done. The jury had seen it. The real Michaels, the man behind the badge. The judge announced, "The jury will begin deliberations tomorrow morning." Gasps echoed. The end was near. As the courtroom emptied, Danielle sat frozen. Michaels, being escorted out, turned his head just enough to whisper across the distance, "This isn't over." The words slithered through her like smoke. Part 5 ended not with peace, but with fire rekindled. Because as the jury prepared to decide, one truth hung in the balance. Would justice finally strike? Or would Officer Michaels slip away one last time? The morning sun spilled across the courthouse steps, but it did little to ease the chill that settled over the crowd. For 5 long weeks, the city had lived inside this trial. Every testimony, every tear, every photograph of Danielle Taylor's bruises had been burned into the collective conscience. And now it was coming to an end. Inside the courtroom, the air was taut like a stretched wire. Danielle sat at the plaintiff's table, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles blanched. Her sister sat behind her, whispering prayers under her breath. To Danielle's right, Attorney Marcus Green shuffled papers, but his eyes were locked on the jury box. Opposite them, Officer Brent Michaels leaned stiffly in his chair, jaw clenched, eyes darting. His once polished uniform now looked like armor that couldn't protect him anymore. His lawyer, Grant Whitmore, whispered in his ear, but Michaels wasn't listening. The bailiff stepped forward. "All rise." Court is in session. The judge, gray-haired and solemn, took a seat. He scanned the courtroom, then nodded. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreperson, a middle-aged black woman in a burgundy blazer, rose, clutching a folded piece of paper. We have, Your Honor. The silence was suffocating. Danielle's heart hammered so violently she thought it might crack her ribs. The judge nodded. Please read the verdict. The foreperson's voice was steady. On the charge of aggravated assault with intent to cause bodily harm, we, the jury, find the defendant, Officer Brent Michaels, guilty. A gasp tore through the gallery. Danielle gripped the edge of the table, her body trembling. On the charge of obstruction of a public servant in the line of duty, guilty. Her chest heaved. On the charge of falsifying official reports to conceal misconduct, guilty. 3 words, repeated 3 times. And each time they landed like thunderclaps inside her chest. For the first time in weeks, Danielle let herself exhale. The judge's gavel struck. Officer Michaels, bail is revoked. You are remanded into custody pending sentencing. The bailiff approached. As handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Michael's massive discipline shattered. He spat curses under his breath, twisting toward Danielle. You think this is justice, he hissed. This doesn't end here. Deputies shoved him forward. The gallery erupted. Cheers, tears. Reporters rushing out to broadcast the news. But Danielle sat still, frozen. The verdict was in, but her soul didn't feel lighter. Not yet. The streets exploded. Justice for Danielle. Protesters roared, signs waving high. Firefighters in uniform embraced one another, chanting her name. News anchors stood breathless before cameras, calling it a landmark moment in accountability. Yet not everyone cheered. Across the street, a smaller group of counter-protesters shouted angrily about betraying the badge, their voices drowned out by the jubilation. Danielle stepped outside into the blinding sun, flanked by Marcus and her sister. Microphones thrust forward. Danielle, do you feel vindicated? Will you continue firefighting after this? Do you forgive Officer Michaels? That word again, forgive. Danielle froze, caught in the crosshairs of millions of eyes. Her chest tightened, because she didn't have the answer. Not yet. And then chaos rippled through the crowd. Gasps, shouts, reporters surging forward. Danielle turned, and her blood ran cold. There he was, Officer Brent Michaels, still in his courtroom suit, wrists cuffed in front, flanked by deputies escorting him to a transport van. But instead of keeping his head down, he stopped, his eyes locked onto Danielle's. And then he dropped to his knees. The crowd erupted in confusion, some jeering, some stunned silent. Reporters screamed over one another, cameras flashing like lightning. Michael's voice cracked, raw, breaking through the noise. I was wrong. I let hate consume me. I destroyed myself. And I nearly destroyed you. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I beg you, don't carry my poison. Don't let me break you the way I broke myself. The world held its breath. Danielle's hands shook at her sides. She saw flashes, the fire, his hand slamming her down, the night's cry alone in the dark. And now this, the man who once treated her like less than human, was kneeling before her. She stepped forward, her voice carrying above the roar of the crowd. What you did to me wasn't just an attack on me. It was an attack on every firefighter who risks their life and gets treated like a criminal. On every black woman who works twice as hard for half the recognition. On every citizen who trusted the badge, only to be betrayed. Her eyes burned, but her voice was steel. So no, I don't forgive you. Not today. Because forgiveness without change is just permission. You want forgiveness? Earn it. Spend every breath you've got left making sure no one else suffers what you did to me. The crowd erupted. Cheers. Tears. Reporters scribbling furiously. Michaels bowed his head, sobbing silently, before deputies yanked him to his feet and dragged him away. Danielle stood taller than ever, her firefighter's badge catching the sunlight. The weeks that followed were unlike anything the city had ever seen. Police reform bills were drafted. Firefighters gained new protections written into law. Across the nation, Danielle's name became a rallying cry. But none of that mattered more than the quiet nights back at her firehouse. The soot, the gear, the sound of alarms in the dark. Because Danielle Taylor wasn't just a symbol. She was still a firefighter. And despite the scars, despite the fear, she pulled her boots back on and ran toward the flames again. Not because she had to, because she chose to. And that's the story of Danielle Taylor, the firefighter who stood against fire, hate, and injustice and refused to break. She wasn't just attacked. She rose. She wasn't just a victim. She became a voice. She wasn't just a firefighter. She was a fighter. Now I'll leave you with this question. If you were in Danielle's shoes, would you forgive? Or would you demand change first? Let me know in the comments. I read every one. And if you want more powerful true stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Because the world needs voices that refuse to be silenced.